Society is about to go to hell. Okay, the floodgates of hell are about to open up in Western society. I mean, guys, it is bad. So many of you don't know this, but the Supreme Court is set any day now to rule on a case that could literally shift how things work in the United States forever. Basically, you already know that homeless people are regularly picked up by the cops in the US if they sleep on the streets. They are also dragged out from the woods. If they go into the woods and try to live in the woods, the cops will come out there, the marshals will come out there, drag them out of the woods. They'll be prosecuted, they'll be ticketed. It's a living nightmare. Well, that could all be set to change based on a Supreme Court ruling that could result in a lot of people just becoming homeless in the US instead of paying rent. Yeah, I'm not joking. This is a massive implication on everything. By the way, if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure to hit the like button. And if you're new to the Angry Guy channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get new videos early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. So, I mean, this is something that has been coming and cooking for a long time, and it's going to change things. I honestly think that the Supreme Court is going to rule that the unhoused can basically live on public land if the state cannot provide shelter for them. So that's basically what it is. Can the cops move you, force you to get off the street, off public land, if they do not have a place to put you, if they do not have proper housing or shelters to put you in? And that's going before the Supreme Court, because basically it's essentially illegal to be in the United States without housing. You'll be ticketed, you'll be punished, you'll be fined, you'll be thrown in jail numerous times. There was a man who he basically was homeless and he was sleeping in lots and on the land, and they basically got pissed off with him. The cops shackled him, threw him in a police van just for sleeping in the grass. And as a result of what happened, there was a stop along the way. He got tossed and he suffered a really bad injury. He ended up paralyzed, and the cops say that nothing happened. It was all on video, by the way, because there was a camera inside of the van monitoring him, and the video was released. The cops are like, "We didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. He's a bad person. He was homeless. He's been told not to sleep outside for a long time. He was basically sleeping in the grass somewhere, and they said, you're going to jail today for it, and that's his punishment for being homeless." And it's not like Gen Zers who are just, these are some bad muffins. These are some bad muffins. It's hard today. It is very, very hard today. 600,000 full-time jobs have been lost, while the current administration is saying that almost 300,000 part-time jobs have been created, and we have one of the best economies in American history. Yeah, I mean, so the corruption that we're seeing in the Western society is now equal to many of the third world countries overseas. We absolutely live in a banana republic. Many of you don't understand the concept of a banana republic. The United States is actually a republic. Yeah, the United States is actually a republic, not a democracy, and people don't comprehend that meaning, right? So the term banana republic was first coined in 1904 by American writer Henry, O. Henry, in Political Science, and it describes a politically and economically unstable country that heavily relies on the exports of natural resources. Essentially, it's a nation where the economy is disproportionately dependent on a single commodity, often agriculture, like like bananas. But it more so, it really just refers to an economically unstable country. And in these types of countries, you basically end up seeing a variety of terrible actions occur. So it's a country with an economy of state capitalism, whereby the country is operated by a private commercial enterprise for the exclusive profit of the ruling class. Many of you don't understand that the United States is actually a federal corporation. All of the cities in the United States operate as corporations, and they can all go bankrupt. They're all basically just trying to they sell bonds, and they're trying to pay the interest on those bonds, but they can't afford to anymore, which is the reason why they're all trying to crank up inflation, because by the inflation increasing and it results in the value of the money declining, and thereby the value of the debt declines, and as such, the government is then able to pay its bills by just printing a ton more money. So this problem is not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. So let's just go ahead and jump right into the video.
Any day now, the Supreme Court is expected to rule on a case that could have far-reaching implications for the unhoused across America. John Blackstone reports on what's at stake.
With foothills rising above, Boise, Idaho is a place of beauty. But it's the city's less scenic quarters, dead ends and back alleys, that were Robert Martin's home on and off for 15 years.
I'm just sitting here about like so, and had a blanket wrapped up, had it laying down underneath me as a little bit of cushioning between me and the ground, and just trying to catch a few winks.
On nights when Boise's homeless shelters were full, Martin got sleep wherever he could.
There were times I've slept in garage stairwells on cement, slept in rock, up under overpasses on the rocks and dirt.
But in Boise, sleeping or camping on public property was against the law. Martin was one of many ticketed and fined for sleeping in public.
And Robert's case I thought it was a vivid portrayal of the situation that homeless people find themselves in.
Howard Beladoff of Idaho Legal Aid Services saw a constitutional issue in Boise's camping ordinance and made a federal case out of it.
Here's a guy, he has no place to sleep. He's been walking around all night because he's been warned you can't, quote unquote, camp, which just means you can't have a blanket around you.
In 2009, in federal court, Beladoff filed a lawsuit that came to be known as Martin versus Boise, arguing that the city of Boise had violated the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution's ban on cruel and unusual punishment by leaving those without homes nowhere to legally sleep.
It's cruel and unusual in the true sense of the word, because every single one of us, rich, poor, old, young, male, female, they need to sleep.
9 years later, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, based in San Francisco, agreed with Beladoff, writing it considered whether the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment bars a city from prosecuting people criminally for sleeping outside on public property, concluding it does.
And the fact that the courts have crippled our ability to do our jobs to help get people into shelter is criminal.
San Francisco's Mayor London Breed blames Martin versus Boise for worsening the city's crisis. A court order bars San Francisco from clearing sidewalk encampments unless it can guarantee a place to sleep for everyone it moves. A challenge in a city with more than 8,000 homeless, but fewer than 4,000 shelter beds. Nationally, there is a lack of shelter beds. By one estimate, about 188,000 more people need shelter than there are beds available. But the Martin versus Boise decision applies only to the 9 western states under Ninth Circuit jurisdiction. In the rest of the country, 14 states have laws making it a crime to camp in public places, and 27 states have laws against vagrancy and loitering that can be used to move along those sleeping in public. Those kind of laws have effectively been outlawed in Ninth Circuit states.
What the Ninth Circuit has said is that a person can't be punished for being homeless if there aren't adequate shelter beds or places for them to go.
Erwin Chemerinsky is a leading constitutional scholar and dean of the law school at UC Berkeley. The Eighth Amendment prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment, we think of it as being applied to death penalty cases, for example. How can it be applied to homelessness?
In 1962, the United States Supreme Court said it's cruel and unusual punishment to punish somebody for a status. In that case, they said you can't punish somebody for being a drug addict. You can punish them for taking drugs, for possessing drugs, but not for the status of being addicted. Likewise, the Federal Court of Appeals here has said you can't punish somebody for the status of being unhoused.
Needing more affordable housing.
Since the unhoused can't be denied a place to sleep, Mayor Kate Collin in San Rafael, California, is almost powerless to move the person living in a tent beside City Hall. Shelters here are usually full, which means this suburban city of 60,000 can legally do little about encampments on its streets.
Every time we passed an ordinance, we were sued, either immediately or within the time frame that could happen.
It must be frustrating to try to say to residents here, sorry, we can't move the people who are camped at the end of your street because the court has told us we can't.
It is frustrating. People don't want to hear that San Rafael doesn't have the independent ability to work with our unhoused community. So when we say it's because of the federal law, it takes people a moment to say, really?
While many cities complain about Martin versus Boise, Grants Pass, Oregon is doing something. The city appealed to the Supreme Court. When the case was argued in April, advocates for the unhoused demonstrated outside the court, while inside, attorney Theane Evangelos, representing Grants Pass, urged the justices to overturn Martin versus Boise.
It would be a disaster if Martin were to remain on the books in any form.
How did Grants Pass, Oregon, population what, about 40,000, become central to this case before the Supreme Court?
It was sued by a group of plaintiffs who claimed that it would be cruel and unusual punishment for Grants Pass to enforce its local camping ordinances.
The Supreme Court decision expected this month could impact homeless policy across the country.
All of us living here within the Ninth Circuit have seen the effects firsthand of these decisions. And that's why if the Supreme Court were to agree with the Ninth Circuit, those conditions would spread to the rest of the country, and that would be the opposite of solving this problem.
On the other hand, I think there's such a compelling argument on behalf of what the Ninth Circuit said, that you can't make something a crime if there's no alternative.
What's on the line in the Supreme Court in this?
For homeless people, the question is, are they going to face criminal punishment because they don't have else to live? For cities, the question is, what can cities do lawfully to deal with their unhoused population? And for the Constitution, the question is, what's this going to mean for the Eighth Amendment?
Robert Martin no longer lives on the streets, but his thoughts remain with those who still search for places to sleep.
Being homeless should never equate to an unlawful act. Being homeless is an unforeseen and an unfortunate circumstance.
For Howard Beladoff, the attorney who started it all, the case is not only about the rights of the homeless, it's also about their humanity.
They feel so powerless because nobody listens and nobody cares. For the first time, they feel like they're a person. And they're recognized.
So as you guys can see, this is a living hell. You know, they've appealed to the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court were to, rule in the favor of the state and say, okay, yeah, no, you can continue picking homeless people up off the streets, punishing them for sleeping on the streets when they don't have an alternative to being homeless. If you cannot provide them with housing or a place to go, if the state does rule that they can punish someone based on their status of being homeless, then it opens up a whole other can of worms. But if it doesn't rule that way, and I don't think it will, it's going to be a living hell. They can also just rule on portions of things possibly, but honestly, like I said, if they do rule on this directly, and I think that it's probably going to lean more in the direction of they cannot prosecute people, punish people for being homeless, or even remove them from the streets if something is not open. And if the police want to say, well, okay, well, we don't want you sleeping here, well, then you're going to have to open up the jails and provide housing for the homeless in jails and prisons, which is a whole other issue, because a person does not want it is not unreasonable to say that you do not want to sleep in a jail cell, because then you do not have the rights to come and go as you please. So essentially you are being detained. It's crazy. And right now, I read a comment from one of you guys said that the US is about to release 800,000 people from the prisons. 800,000. If that's true, that's absolutely insanity. And I mean, guys, the US actually incarcerates more people, not by ratio, more people than any other country in the world. The US has more people incarcerated, locked up in jails and prisons than even China. that has over 1 billion people, has a population of over 1 billion people. So I'm sure you can see right here what the major implications are of all of this. And if this actually ends up happening, you're going to have people moving out to the woods, all right, setting up their trailers in the woods, setting up their tents in the woods. And it would be cruel on, what's the state? The state basically cannot say, a blanket counts as a tent. That's how they argue. Or it counts as a tent. If this actually passes, and people are now, and the Supreme Court rules that now, yeah, you can't punish someone for being homeless unless you can provide shelter for these people. Unless you can provide shelter for them, you cannot punish them for sleeping on state land. And it is not, and you cannot be unreasonable either, because if they're out there and it's cold and they need to be protected from the elements, it is reasonable for them to live in a tent or an RV or a vehicle. So again, that's another big problem. That's another big problem. It's a crazy reality, but it's true. Even for people who park their cars on city streets and sleep in their cars on city streets, the cops will come around. I know, because I was homeless once, and they'll tell you to move. But guess what? If you're homeless and you're sleeping in your car on a city street, they won't be able to do that anymore. And if they do that, you can turn around and sue the state. And the state damn well knows it's a violation. They don't want to. The state does not want to get into trouble with the Supreme Court. It's a very, very slippery slope. You don't want to mess around with the Supreme Court. The only thing that the U.S. government could actually do is to turn around, and they wouldn't be able to just simply pass just any law to criminalize homelessness. They would have to, because they already have these laws in place on the state level. Even if they tried to do it on the federal level, the law would be unconstitutional. So they would actually have to go and amend the Constitution to allow them to discriminate based on status, and for certain exceptions. Okay, so we can discriminate for homelessness, or we can discriminate based on exceptions on status. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. With the economy headed for the gutter, guys, we're gonna have so many people homeless, and not only are we gonna have a lot of people homeless, you're gonna have people who don't need to be homeless. So you have people who have jobs and all of this stuff, and they're spending thousands of dollars a month, and they're just gonna basically say, you know what, I'm gonna go rent an RV, and it's gonna I'm gonna go or buy an RV or whatever, or whatever it is, y'all. They're already doing it. And I'm gonna set up our trailer, and I'm gonna set up shop on a piece of public land. And if they try to move me, I will sue the pants off them. I will win. Yes, sir. No, sir. Listen to me. And they will have their attorneys. And listen to me, if they violate their rights, it's over. You're going to have all of these people camped out on public lands, going out to public parks, living in public parks. And if the government cannot provide these people with shelter housing, oh, we have a bunch of camps set up. We'll take you to a camp right now. Okay, let's go to the camp, sir. If they go there and there are no beds there, and it's overcrowding, and then here's another thing, the conditions. If the conditions are just terrible, right? That's unreasonable. So, for example, if you take someone to a shelter and there's an outbreak of tuberculosis in there, or the conditions are extremely poor in there, that's cruel and unusual punishment. To force it to say, well, it's a crime to be homeless if we cannot, if we can provide you a shelter, then you have to accept the shelter, and it doesn't matter the kind of shelter. But if the shelter that they are providing is something that puts your life at risk, or the conditions within this shelter are so poor that the alternative of being out on the street, sleeping on public land, would be better, that is also cruel and unusual punishment. And it's also, not only is it cruel and unusual punishment, but then it could also fall under under being detained, under detainment, where basically the state is forcibly detaining you and punishing you for being homeless by putting you in unsanitary, filthy, unreasonable environments that no one would a reasonable person would not want to be in. That's what is reasonable: unsanitary, unsafe, okay, unhygienic. If they provide you with a place to sleep, it has to meet at least some basic standards. And there's also overcrowding. That's another big issue. Just like how you have issues with prisons that are overcrowded and they have to release prisoners. If you start to try to stuff people into these shelters that are overcrowded, that's serious violations of rights. I told you it's going to be hell on earth. It's going to be, and they're going to try stuff like this, and it's going to, they're going to try with the FEMA camps, and they're going to run into a lot of problems. They're going to have a lot of people who are now living in like these expensive apartments, just suffering, and they're going to say, no, I'm going to, I'll go live in my car. I'll buy a van. I'll buy a van. I'll live on public land. I'll set up a private, I'll build a little latrine or whatever I have to. People will get creative and they'll just start living. They'll just basically start living on public land. And these cities, especially like places like New York, will turn into hellholes overnight because no one's going to pay these rents anymore. Right now, people are only paying these rents because it's illegal to be homeless. Guys, I told you, hell on earth is coming. Don't forget, I have another channel called Men Walking Away. If you're enjoying the content on this channel, you want even more of this content. If you want even more Angry Guy content, check out the Men Walking Away channel where I release daily videos. There's a link to it in the description of the video. Go check it out, subscribe to the channel, enjoy the content. Guys, what do you think regarding all of this? Society is about to go to hell. Hell on earth is about to arrive. Let me know your thoughts and we'll talk about it in the comments. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, Men Walking Away, and cheers.